Welcome to Story Expo's Masters of Story Roundtable discussion.
Welcome to Story Expo's Masters of Story. I'm Dara Christopher. I am here with, if you can use a baseball analogy, the murderer's row of top story people in the world. Let me just do a quick introduction. We've got Chris Vogler, Dara Marks, Corey Mandell, David S. Freeman, and John Truby. Welcome, everybody. It's the first time you guys have all been in a room like this. So let's just go right into it. For each of you, and you guys can answer however you want, whenever you want, what is the most important part of storytelling? We'll go ladies first.
Okay. Well, I really feel that the whole nature of storytelling is very underappreciated. That if you really think about what story is, what narrative is, it's a ubiquitous aspect of our entire lives. We often relegate storytelling to an organized story, but "Hi, honey, how was your day?" is narrative. We live in narrative. And, anything that occurs in real time is fleeting. And everything past that moment is memory. And what is memory but narrative? So this is how we know the world and we know life. And I think, therefore, the value of storytelling is something far, far greater than just something that's entertaining.
Yeah.
I think it has a function that really tells us how to live.
I would say the most important thing is the audience. Everything you do, it should be conscious of the effect it's going to have on the audience. And I mean specifically the organs of their bodies, that, what you put on the screen, the words and the actions of the characters should reach out and impact the organs of the body. And I think every audience takes whatever they're seeing unconsciously as a metaphor for their own situation. They're always comparing their situation to that of the characters, and sometimes seeing, oh, they're doing better than I am, and maybe I can steal something from their techniques, or they're doing worse, and boy, I'm going to avoid that because that's been shown to be a bad thing.
But when you're writing a story, then, are you writing something for yourself, or you're writing with an audience in mind?
I think always with an audience in mind, although I think anybody who tries to write, to communicate, is a member of the audience. And that's always been my orientation, advising people, consulting, working on other people's scripts, I'm confident because I'm a member of the audience too. And so if I don't like something, or I don't understand something, I don't feel anything, I think that's a legitimate response, because I'm in the audience too.
To piggyback on that, to your question, I get a lot of writers sent to me, and from my perspective, a lot of writers will fall into two categories. So there's the writers that will write from the inside. They'll write what matters to them. They'll write what's authentic to them, what really is meaningful to them. And often they'll write a lot of scripts that really matter to them, but not a lot of other people. Then there's people that come more outside in. So they're trying to figure out, well, what does the audience want? What is unique and interesting to an audience? And the marketplace has really moved away from them. And these writers, they had a chance of a career, but now it's really hard. What I see the most successful writers do is they start with, what do I want to say? And what is the most meaningful thing to me? And then know how to say that in a way that is compelling to other people. So it's the integration of the two. And I think if you understand where the industry is going, that integration is going to be the key to success.
But what about people who are chasing what they think that the audience wants to see?
Well, first off, that's fool's gold, because nobody knows what everyone else's subjective opinion is. But also, here's the thing. The industry changed. I mean, we're in industry 2.0. Everything changed 10 years ago. And so now it has to be authentic. And there's so much content. There's way more content than anyone could watch.
Yeah.
So what is working is content that people have an emotional connection to, that matters to them. It's not just enough like, oh, it makes me laugh or it makes me think. That it has to matter. Well, here's the thing. It's not going to matter to the audience if it doesn't matter to the writer. Like, that's the first thing when I work with a writer is we'll start with what matters to you more than anything. And from there, we'll work to a concept that will be exciting to other people. So I think you start with just again, if it doesn't matter incredibly to you, it's not going to matter to other people.
What was it that changed 10 years ago?
Oh, what changed 10 years, and I don't want to monopolize the conversation, too many smart people here, but what I would say what changed is, as everyone here knows, the model, the TV industry was, we create product to sell commercials. And what we want is ratings. We want the most number of people watching so we can charge the most to advertisers. So for 50 years, the model was, let's create comfort food. Let's create content that's really easy to watch, because we want as many people watching. We don't want anyone offended. I mean, you know, Breaking Bad couldn't have been made. Atlanta couldn't be made. All right. So we don't want to offend anyone. We want everyone to like it. But more importantly, we want it to be really easy. So you don't have to be paying attention, because what they realized early on is that the main function of TV for most people isn't to entertain. It was to create company, to have a sense of company in the room, to not be alone. So people would have the TV on while they made dinner, ate dinner, did their homework, you know, worked. And so the point was, you didn't have to pay that much attention to TV, because they were all following the same tropes, the same formulas, the same paradigm. So you see one cop show or one comedy show, you've seen them all. So you could tune in and out. You could miss 7 episodes because A, you know, it's episodic, and B, it's the same story structure.
Yeah.
And so they liked it if you weren't paying attention, because that meant you kept the TV on for hours, you counted as a rate. So what changed is, now, even though free TV is free, 81% of all content that's being consumed comes from the paid platforms and the premium cable. And that's a completely different business model, right? I work with showrunners all the time. The world changed 8 years ago. It used to be the total number of viewers, not anymore. Now it's follow through. Now it's how many people watch the first episode, watch all the episodes. Like Girls had an audience of 900,000. That's a complete failure 10 years ago. That is a huge asset for HBO, because 900,000 people, they watched every single episode. And now they're paying a monthly subscription fee. So take that monthly subscription fee and multiply it by 900,000. That's some serious money. So now that's why, to succeed in the marketplace, you can't be writing to the old paradigms, the formulas, the rules. Everything has changed. You have to be able to create something that no one else could create. You have to create characters and a story that only you can create, because it's all about follow through now. And so that's what dramatically changed the industry.
Well, what you're talking about is TV.
Yes.
I think it's important to look at a much bigger perspective and look at all popular storytelling in every medium, because that has changed radically in the last 20 years in every medium. And what are the 3 main things? One is high concept, importance, increased importance of story world, and above all, by far, more dense plot. The one thing that, in working with writers over the last 20 years, that I have found that shocked me was that to be successful in any medium in terms of popular storytelling, you have to be in the top 1% of writers. They get all the work in every medium. And what separates the top 1% of writers from everybody else, and this shocked me, was the ability to create complex plot. Why? Because popular storytelling in every medium is based on genre storytelling. It's not literary fiction. It's not classical family drama as it, say, used to be in television 40 years ago. It's all genre storytelling, and now it's not just one genre like Jaws, you know, horror story. It's combining genres. Why? Because the studios say, we want to give them 2 for the price of 1. And what are genres? Genres are plot systems, right? With 15 to 20 unique story beats make that genre. So what happens when you combine genres? You go from 15 to 20 story beats, plot beats, to 30 to 40 plot beats. Fantastic, because we have the same 2 hours. Unless you're James Cameron, you only get 2 hours in a movie. So what has happened is you get this incredible importance of plot. And the problem for writers is, and one reason why I am so excited about doing this class that we're going to do, is that plot is the hardest thing to teach, and it is by far the hardest thing to learn. And what I have found in really emphasizing plot for the last 10 years with writers, what I have found is the biggest reason that they do not know how to construct a complex or even a decent plot, they don't even know what plot is. The standard understanding of how plot works is completely wrong. And that is the biggest obstacle I find that writers have in order to be successful, because they can't do a 2-hour plot, or in the case of television, where plot is even more important, because as you just said, it's no longer about the episode, it's about the season. Mm-hmm. Right?
But if I can just real quick on I would just respectfully disagree on features, because everything changed in TV because the model changed. Okay, in features, the model didn't change. So I agree with you that they're still want to be making films the way they used to make it, because they see it as riskless or low risk. It isn't, but they see it that way. But it's not working. It's not working. It's completely failing. No, let me just finish. So I know the people at Marvel, I know the people at the studios, they are moving to a model of away from predictable plot-driven stories, because the audience is so bored of that. Because the audience, that's why no one's going to theaters. You get better storytelling on TV, and the studios are realizing that they got to turn their ship around, and they got to stop making films the way they used to make, because nobody cares anymore. So I agree with you right now, but I think if you look at where the industry is going, I think that model is going to be completely outdated.
See, I'm not talking about predictable plot. What I said is the importance in plot is not repeating the same plot model.
Right.
One of the things I talk about in genre storytelling is there are 3 rules of Hollywood that determine everything. One is it's a genre world, and if you don't know how to write your genre stories, you are not in the business. You don't have any chance.
And what genre is Poor Things?
Pardon?
What genre is Poor Things?
That's an art film.
Okay.
So
it's going to make zero. Yeah, and it's basically a Frankenstein story. But my point is, we're talking about popular storytelling, which is what Hollywood is all about, right? So 1 is it's a genre world. 2 is you have to combine 2 to 4 genres. And 3, you have to transcend the genre, meaning you can't write the predictable plot that genre, that everybody else in that genre is writing. If you're writing a detective story that just hits the beats, you are not going to go anywhere, because 10,000 other people who are writing detective stories are hitting that too. You have to do that genre in a way we have never seen before. That's how you take genre storytelling and add the individuality that can stand out.
If I can jump in here.
Go ahead.
If that's all right. So it's really rewarding for me to hear all of your perspectives, because there's a lot of experience in this room, and it's evident when everyone speaks. I disagree with you on a few things, and I'll tell you why. I do not see any increase in story density at all. I mean, you just take a look at Ahsoka and try to explain to me how many PhD theses are going to be written about that show, trying to dissect its various elements. Not many. It's a really simple show. Pretty much, you set up a Star Wars universe and then you kind of watch the paint dry. And that's about it. And not to say that there haven't been some great wonderful pieces in that universe. I'm not sure that one's ever going to rise to the top. And I've been rewatching Battlestar Galactica, the Ronald Moore version. It's so dense. Take a look. One of my favorite TV shows that ran for 6 seasons was called Parenthood. Jason Katims was the showrunner. So dense. And I just see these things kind of go in cycles, and one showrunner does one thing, and I don't really see any changes. And when you're talking about plot, I think you're talking about imagination, and that's always been the problem. There's nothing wrong with formulas unless someone can tell you're writing a formula. If anyone ever sees your formula poking through, then they are detached from your movie. They're not emotionally involved, or your TV series. And they go, oh, okay, this is just being spoon-fed to me out of a recipe book. And the difficulty was never plot. It's always been imagination. How How original are your characters? How original is your dialogue? How original are the emotional moments? How unexpected are the twists? How fresh is your material? How new are your insights? Or how newly expressed are they? And am I surprised every 20 seconds or so by something going on screen? Just rewatch Jerry Maguire. Every 20 seconds, Cameron Crowe, the writer, is doing something that just surprises the hell out of you. It's very rewarding as an audience, and you know you're in the capable hands of a showrunner. But that didn't address your question. That's just my response.
Go ahead.
And you can contradict me and probably prove me wrong in a million different ways. But I want to share what I shared with you. Is that right? Because I have never thought about what a story is. I don't really know what a story is. I have some shoes that I bought from Nike that were designed. They had a contest where people had to design shoes. And I was going to bring them with you, and I just couldn't go to storage to get them out, that represented their city. But the shoe, the one for New York, has all these different colors of brown and white, the skin colors of the people, and the shoelaces are blue and green, and they're the water around New York City. And there's some gray, pebbly stuff, and that's like the cement. And the woman who won, this was her version of New York City. It's a beautiful shoe. And people who wear it are wearing her story. You know, I used to work in video games for a while. I took a diversion in 2003 for about 8 years and wrote a book. I have a copy here. Maybe I'll flash the screen. It doesn't really matter. But it was called Creating Emotion in Games with 300 Ways to Make Video Games Emotionally Engaging. And that was before people were even talking about emotion in interactive entertainment. And I was really interested in the story that the player had. Like, I stopped being interested in the story that we were telling and much more interested in the story that the user would have. So that's another form. The world of story, I go from watching very art house stuff to watching somebody befriending a baby owl and saving it on YouTube, and then the owl becomes their best friend. It's all story to me. But anyway, I don't know what a story is because it encompasses all of that. It's something meaningful to me that happened to someone else, and I hear it or I experience it, and it touches me inside, and it might be their experience of New York, or it might be them saving a baby owl, or it might be Poor Things, or whatever it is. But this is what I had prepared, and I hope it's okay. This is my idea of what story is. So to me, story is an intersection of one abomination and 5 miracles. The abomination is that if we count Neanderthals, we've been traipsing around the planet for 430,000 years, and yet most people are beset by emotional problems, stresses, difficulties, traumas, anxieties, and that they don't have, that in 430,000 years, man has not evolved a readily accessible way to erase the effects of these things and begin each day anew and fresh and wonderful. And that we carry these burdens with us as we get older. That to me is abomination. There should be a way, you know, by now that people can get a fresh start every day. Do I think such a thing is possible? Maybe, but that's not what we're here to talk about. But this abomination, the complete inability for people to master their own subconscious or unconscious, is the fodder for writers. And pretty much every TV show I've ever loved, and pretty much every movie I've ever loved, was some writer mining, we call it a character arc, mining the emotional difficulties that beset one or more characters.
Like, give me an example.
Well, I mean, I talked about parenthood.
Yeah.
This person has an autistic kid, and they had an idea of what parenthood should be and what it is like to be a father. And now his dreams of having a father-son relationship have been thrown out the window. And without these dreams, he doesn't know who he is. And he's got to figure it out. A teenage girl has one dream and one dream only, to get into Berkeley. And when she doesn't get into Berkeley, she starts drinking too much and gets in a big car accident. And this is drama. This is what we watch. And in the hands of Jason Katims, I'm more than happy to sit back and go along for the ride.
And then what are the miracles that follow?
So the miracles are, if you go, there's a museum, for those of you who are not in Los Angeles, up the coast called the Getty Museum, where you can see statuary from the Greeks and the Romans. It's a miracle that people can put life into objects. If you go to a Taylor Swift concert, what are you experiencing? You're experiencing vibrations in the air. It's a material thing. And yet somehow the human spirit can get stuck into the material stuff. These statues still have the spirit of the creators in them.
This very much goes to what you discussed. Yeah.
I don't know how it's possible, and there's no lingo that we've ever developed, no nomenclature of the spirit that describes this. Number two, those statues or these films you watch from the 1940s are still radiating their beauty decades later, or hundreds of years later, or thousands of years later. The ability to emanate a wavelength, a beauty wavelength or an emotional wavelength. You go to the Van Gogh Museum in Amsterdam, And people are chatting, and they walk into the museum, and then silence. They're being hit by so much information, so many viewpoints at the same time. The fact that anything beautiful never runs out of its ability to emanate is the second miracle. The third thing is that all of us are in the process of helping people write better. I think it's safe to, that you can take logical techniques. Here is 30 ways to make your dialogue sound natural. That's kind of a thing I teach. Or here are 65 ways to create suspense in a scene, something I teach. And people can take these very logical things and put them together to something that transcends logic. They can create something beautiful that logic cannot assail, that logic can't describe, and that logic can lead to something beyond logic is the next miracle. And then the next thing is that if you watch a movie, well, a movie might work for me, and yet it might do nothing for you. So then I have to put my life force into a film or TV show. And how that happens, I don't know, but it happens. So I have to imbue it with life, just like children imbue their stuffed toys with life. That's the next miracle. And the last thing is that aesthetics lift us up. You watch people dancing at a Bruce Springsteen concert or a Taylor Swift concert. They're not thinking about their personal problems. And somehow this aesthetic wavelength can lift people up. How does that happen? I don't know. One abomination, 5 miracles. And we, in this room, are so fortunate that we've been able, either through our own writing or the writers that we've worked with, to help these miracles come to life over and over again, and the world gets enriched. I think all of us would probably say that one of our proudest achievements are the people we helped who've gone on to create beauty far beyond the capacity for one individual to create. What a joy.
But it's very much what you talk about. It's got to make something in the body reverberate. It's got to make something shake. It's got to make something move.
Yeah, and I think that is something that can be cultivated in the artist. That by having the intention to do that, by being aware of those potential miracles. I mean, I didn't really understand this until I spent some time in the editing room, and I saw how intently the editor and the director were staring at that screen and trying to project something, what you're talking about. They're packing it. They're charging that frame. And the cinematographer does that, and the actors do that, and the writer does that on the page, tries to do that. So
yeah, I mean, we all have our own approach here to helping those miracles take place. You know, my approach, I'm a technique guy. I don't have any theories about anything, but if you want to know 89 ways to make us care about a character or identify with them, I know that. But one person's going to take those techniques and they're going to write something like Finding Nemo, and someone else is going to write Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels, and somebody else is going to do Fleabag, and who knows, you know, the floodgates of the imagination are wide open, and I always am amazed to see, but the techniques are still there. Just if you want to care about a character, here's some ways to do it.
I think David made a great point, which is, you know, I love talking story theory. I mean, I don't know about the rest of you, but I think a lot of people started because somehow they had to read Aristotle's Poetics. And besides, you know, trying to get through the incomprehensibility of it, you know, this is classic philosophy, it's classic theory. And my complaint was always, as a pragmatist, was always, how does that tell you how to write a great play, which is what his method was. He started with the great plays and tried to create a theory out of it. But I didn't see it going the other way. And so one of the things I think I would love to hear everybody's thought on, which is I think so important for what we're doing here, is that if it is true that you have to be in the top 1% to be a working professional writer in any medium, the question is, how do you get there? And this is especially negative time right now because we're in this entertainment business recession. And I think that the natural response of writers is to say, I give up. I can't do this. I'm
not sure that it has to be the top 1%. I was saying earlier, I don't remember to which one of you, that you know, I've been with the same woman for a long time, many decades, and we would try to find a romantic comedy streaming. And, you know, all these romantic comedies on Amazon and Netflix, and then we go to Rotten Tomatoes. Crap, you know, 62%, 71%. looking for science fiction or fantasy shows, 81%, 52%. There's just an incredible tsunami of horrible stuff being made where the writers are not in the 1%, at least according to Rotten Tomatoes, and I found it to be fairly reflective.
But are you talking about 1% to be good?
No, 1% to be commercial.
No,
I'm talking about
you're talking about compared to other shows that have been made. I'm not talking about that.
I don't think that streamers are hiring the top 1%.
Yes, they are.
Sometimes they do.
They are. They are talking and in fiction, for example, the numbers on Amazon. The top 1% of writers sell 99% of the books. That is the hard, fast number. In terms of, when I'm talking about top 1%, I mean compared to all other people writing today.
Yeah.
People who want to write professionally. And I always liken it to being a professional athlete. You know, I would love to be point guard for the Lakers. I'm never going to do that because I don't have that skill level. And what used to always drive me crazy, Chris, you and I, when we would do the story summits with Derek, would on Saturday evening would have a panel, and Sid would be there, and Linda, and Michael Haig, and Chris and I would be up there, would be answering questions. All of the questions were, how do I get an agent, right? And how do I sell my script? And my response was always, look, for 99% of the writers, when they finally meet a connection who can actually help you, they do not have the story skills to be able to make it pay off. That is a fact. And so my question is, and why I think your point was so important about the technique is, and why I think we're together, is because we're trying to take this to another level of professional techniques that you can use to actually translate theory into practice that can actually be a script that gives you a shot. Nobody can guarantee it, but gives you a shot to sell. And I just think that this whole idea of how do you translate theory into practice through technique is the question.
I would like to answer that, but I think
Dara
said first. I will defer to Dara.
It's okay. Actually, I was going to comment on something you said.
Oh, no.
Oh, yes, but in a good way.
Okay.
Well, please say what you're going to say so I can comment on what you said.
Okay. Well, I think we're all talking about some very interesting aspects of storytelling, and it's sounding a little bit like they're mutually exclusive, and I think it's the kind of the opposite. It's inclusive. That you mentioned how important it is for writers to actually examine their work and to see what is the story I'm telling and why do I need to tell this story. And then you were talking about how important it is to actually have an imagination where you are creating unique and interesting plots and so on. And you know, it's kind of like the two have to go together, and this is a big part that's missing right now in how writers are being trained, and even at the highest levels. We're seeing so many movies made by some of the top filmmakers that are kind of like, 3 hours of I can't put together what the story is even
They're missing
about.
the mark.
They're missing their own mark.
Why are they missing the mark, though?
Well, okay. I really think one of the biggest problems we have in our specific industry, it's one of the few artistic industries that I can think of in the entire world that doesn't honor technique and honor the ability to learn your craft. It's almost looked down upon that if I'm a great writer, it should just spill out of the top of me. And you know what? Sometimes a good story will just appear. But it doesn't mean you can duplicate your own success if you don't have a technique to pull it out of you again. I was at a dance recital the other night, and I was just in awe of the level of skill that these dancers could bring to so much dance. And then I said to myself, it's because they know every step. It isn't because one big thing they brought up They knew and they understood every step. And this is what we don't have right now. We don't have a respect for how to develop a technique that really supports your art. You know, I really believe that every single person that is aiming towards being a writer is doing so because they've had moments of glory. They wrote something that their parents, the teachers, friends, they got it published. Something happened that said, I could do this, okay? And so, but the problem is, how do they do this on an ongoing basis? And one of the reasons I think you can bring so many different teachers together who we really teach we have different approaches. And for me, and I suspect the rest of you feel the same. I don't want anybody to become a Dara Marks screenwriter, you know, but I can give you information. And if it lands for you, that means that I am helping to make conscious something you've been doing unconsciously. And now it becomes a tool. And now you can use it over and over again. And you can duplicate your own success. And you can create greater and better stories because you can manage your technique. You don't spend your entire creative life waiting for the muse. Yeah. Yeah. You are the muse, you know, it lies within you. And so this is why I think technique is so important and why I'm so excited about you bringing so many people together at this high a level to teach the craft so that everyone in the audience can fill their toolbox, no matter who they're listening to. Somebody is going to go, oh, of course. Right. Yeah. And I'm sure we've all had the experience too, where you're teaching and suddenly there's a student who's been paying a lot of attention and then you suddenly lose them because they're writing away. And I think it's wonderful. It means I touched that for them and they just dove in deeper.
So I'm going to jump in and be very audacious, and I'm going to have an answer for what John was asking. How do you train people to do this, and why are people missing the mark? And I have to say, everyone at this table is smarter than me, so I have to say that where this comes from is I think I have a unique...
Thank you. I wondered when you were going to notice.
I noticed from the very beginning. But I have a unique path to have gotten here. I started out as a studio reader, reading scripts, evaluating scripts. And then I wanted to be a writer, and I studied all of the theory and all of the books, and I just felt lost like most people do. And I was really lucky to have some really smart Academy Award-winning producers take me under their wing and really help me. I was a professional screenwriter for 11 years, worked for all the studios. And for the last 7 years now, I train writers and I work with showrunners. So I have a unique perspective. Doesn't mean it's the right perspective, but this is my audacious answer. Most writers fall into one of two categories. They tend to be conceptual or intuitive. Conceptual writers tend to work very outside in. So they really, you ask them, where'd you start? And they start with a concept or world building or some plot, you know, a twist ending. Or and they're very focused on what other people are going to find interesting. Then there are intuitive writers, and intuitive writers are the opposite. They write from an authentic place. They write what is real to them, and they write what the characters would actually do. Conceptual writers, if they're trained and they're smart, they can come up with great concepts. They can have great story beats, but they always fall short with character, dialogue, and emotional resonance, and they know that. And they don't know what to do about it, and the books don't help. The thing is, you cannot drink a milkshake with a hammer, and you can't pound nails with a drinking straw. You got to use the right tool. So the conceptual brain is the worst part to be doing characters, dialogue, and emotional resonance. Intuitive writers, they don't create characters, they don't invent characters, they discover characters, and they're like real people to them. So intuitive writers never get lonely when they write because they're hanging out with like their friends. Here's the key. Everyone, when we write, we want to create the best possible script. So what we do, knowingly or unknowingly, is we play to our strengths and we hide our weaknesses. So there's this adage that the more you write, the better you'll get. Total nonsense. Yeah. It's like Santa Claus. The more you write, the higher the pile of similarly flawed scripts. So what I do with creative integration, which I'll be doing, talking about over the weekend, is when agents or managers send me writers who are great with concept and story, we tie their hand behind their back and we make them work intuitively. And with intuitive writers, we make them work conceptually, because intuitive writers have great characters, great emotion, always in search of a story they can never find. So what creative integration is what's your strength and what's your weakness? We're going to take your strength, tie it behind your back. We're going to make you for 6 months work from your weak spot. And this isn't going to your agent. This isn't going to the studio. This is called writer development. Now, once you can get your weak side as strong as your strong side, then comes the really hard part and the really fun part, which is integration. How do you take these two where they work together? That's how you create a pitch-perfect, authentic script, where when you're reading the script or watching a TV show or movie, it's like just hanging out with real people, doing what they really do. You never see the hand of the writer. You never see plot. You just see real characters that you care about, yet they're always doing interesting things, and it adds up to something. That's the needle in the haystack that everyone's looking for.
But can I ask you, is that the difference between amateur writers and professional writers? A professional writer, you have to acknowledge you have weaknesses.
Yeah,
like you have to be willing to kill your babies for
But
something else.
Wait,
it's not just
have you been to the movies lately?
But
Yes,
it's not acknowledging.
Yeah.
That's the first step. The second step is you have to know how to relentlessly attack those weaknesses to turn them into strengths.
You got to get past your ego to do that.
Well, yeah, but you also have to know how to do it. In the last 7 years, we've had over 3,000 of our writers launch careers. It's not because I'm a better teacher. It's not because I'm a smarter teacher. It's because what we teach is different and it works. And I didn't come up with this all by myself. I had a lot of really smart people help me.
Yeah.
So creative integration, that is the key. And it's a process. It's not, techniques aren't going to save anybody.
Yeah.
Lists aren't going to save, genre rules, I don't think. I think it comes down to writing process. And when someone understands how to evolve their process, then they will create a lifetime of better product.
I've got a different take, but it's not contradictory to what you said.
Okay.
It doesn't, it's just I started as a writer in Hollywood. I sold and optioned a number of scripts. Roll forward a little bit, I started teaching, and I started teaching about 1,500 different techniques, 100% of which are addressed to the subconscious or unconscious. None of these are consciously observed by an audience when they go see a film or a TV show. You don't come out of Iron Man 3 talking about the almost opposite traits he has. He's got like 5 different personality traits, and they're not quite opposites, but he's arrogant, but he cares about saving people. He's a nerd, but he's a warrior. I mean, these are what I call skewed opposites or almost opposites, but people don't come out of the film going, well, look at that. That's happening on a subconscious basis, that people go, well, that's an interesting character. So somehow roll the clock forward. I became an executive.
Wait, can you go back real quick? So when you're writing, the writer thinking that?
I'll come back to that in a moment.
Okay.
But just to kind of give some context to the people watching this, somehow I became an executive vice president at Fox, then Disney, and did a lot of writer training and training of content executives with these techniques. And a writer should not feel bad. You say, well, create an interesting character. I don't think it's interesting. I don't think it's easy to create a fascinating character. And if you're having a TV show and you have a cluster of 6 characters, I don't think it's that easy to create 6 fascinating characters. I break down characters into 6 layers. Every character is a sandwich. There are techniques addressed to the subconscious that make characters interesting. You can learn them. You can create a fascinating character every time. I'm not talking about writing from the outside. I'm not talking about writing from the inside. I'll let the writer figure that out, or I'll let you teach them how to do that. Because that's not my focus. It's just a different focus. There are techniques to make us care about a character. I know 89 ways to make us identify with a character. Flip any of them upside down, and we don't like the character. Loyal to a friend betrays a friend. So maybe the character has 6 of these empathy techniques and 1 technique that makes them unlikable. They're a flawed hero or a cool villain if you do the other way around. There are techniques to give emotional depth to a character. Lots of them, like over 40 of them, that makes us feel that this character is not superficial. All of these techniques, 100%, are addressed to the subconscious. No audience member is aware of them, and most beginning writers are not aware of them. And even great writers stumble upon them and then they forget. There are writers who, have made 1 or 2 great screenplays and never done it again. They intuitively hit some of these techniques, and then they didn't know what they were doing because it was all intuitive. So my approach is simply, here are the techniques. Here's 89 ways to make us sympathize with the character. Here are 89 movie clips that show that they work. And now you know them, here's your writing assignment. Create a scene, write a scene. This is what I was doing at Disney and Fox, and use at least 5 of those techniques.
Well, that's what I'm curious. What do each of you have a unique perspective? What do you think makes for a fulfilling character that you are empathetic with? That, I can watch Meryl Streep in a heartbreaking movie, and I can, empathize with her, and but then I can see Bruce Willis kicking ass in Die Hard, and I go, yeah, I want to be Bruce Willis. From your perspectives, what makes for a fulfilling character that you want to watch?
As I understand it, it's audience identification, that I can see something of me in that character. I can imagine myself in, maybe their behavior is extreme, but it overlaps with my possibilities. And if I don't see that, if I don't see some mirror of myself on the screen, reflecting back some part of me or possibility for me or danger for me, then I just check out. And I really, you can see it in the theater. If you stand in the back of the theater and you watch the film, the people are either leaning in like this, hypnotized, in a trance, in an altered state of consciousness, or they're pulled back like this. And they're thinking about what time is it, and the floor is sticky, and they go off the track.
But I've known you for a while. I love Barbie. What do I identify with Barbie that I go, yeah, I like this movie and it entertains me?
Well, in that case, it was more a matter of intelligence gathering for me as an audience member. I'm looking at the women sitting next to me and trying to get something out of what they're getting out of it, and also observing Ken and identifying pretty darn strongly with him.
Yeah.
That I've felt some of the things he's felt. So to me, that's where the movie came alive.
Yeah.
Because that's me in the movie.
And by the way, a lot of the rules disappear when you're doing a comedy. If you get an audience laughing, they will forgive anything.
Yeah.
They will go along for the ride. If they are laughing, things can make sense. They don't have to make sense.
Yeah.
You have them.
Yeah.
And Barbie had some pretty funny moments.
What do you think makes for a fulfilling character?
Well, again, we're all sort of talking around similar things, but for me, the way that I work with story, and this is what I've written about in my book, Inside Story, is that at the end of the day, there's only one story to tell, and that's the human story. It's the only story we know. And what we know what we know mostly unconsciously, but somewhat consciously, is that we move through life by responding to the conflicts and the challenges that we face. And that what the challenges present to us is the opportunity to grow. And so that when we are confronting any kind of a problem or a challenge, there's really only 2 outcomes. Either we grow through it, or the challenge will take us down. And that's the human story. And that's why I said earlier that it's so important for writers to recognize how noble this is, the work that we are doing, because that's human information. Okay, and that's how you create a strong character arc. So it doesn't matter, we can throw clever plots at any story, but we want to make sure that within that plot, within that conflict, there is something that is activating a writer to face that challenge. I mean, one of the things I always say is that what is your character, your protagonist, capable of doing by the end of the story that he or she wasn't capable of at the beginning? Because if the answer is not very much, then truly not very much has happened in that story. So, a brave fighter fights bravely. A cute and adorable couple find cute and adorable love. But what really pulls us in instead is, you were mentioning that you wanted to watch a good romantic comedy. One of the problems with so many romantic comedies are that they are dealing with love and they tell us nothing about the nature of love. It's how cute and adorable you are, or they can reverse it and make somebody a little bit troubled or whatever. But they're not really opening up the deep nature of love. So you look back at some of the classics, like When Harry Met Sally, for example. I mean, it's terrible that you kind of in romantic comedy have to go back that far to find some decent romantic comedy. But that story told us something about the nature of love, that lovers must be friends. They didn't try to write the book of love or anything, but embedded in that story.
Wasn't the advertising campaign the opposite of that? That people are that a man and that was the advertising campaign.
Well,
that a man and woman can't be friends if they're good looking.
Yeah, but
there's often not a match between the advertising and the reality.
But the nature of that story and its longevity, really has to do with something very simple was happening in that story. And so we often, what I encounter constantly with writers who are submitting a draft to me is that, I like what you were saying about integration, that we write to our strengths, and we need to rewrite to our weaknesses. We need to learn how to master that. And, most inspiration comes in the form of a plot. Would it be interesting if, so a plot unfurls itself. And, I always say that, you enter a story anyway, the story invites you in. And then there's the need to stand back and investigate that story. What is that story saying to me and through me? And that's not an answer. Okay, that is a process. That is to me, the nature of creativity itself. And I define creativity as the act of creation, of making new life, so that it's something is being born here. And it's not a question of writing a thesis about something that is brilliantly philosophical. It's about, if you are attacked by the need to create, that something in that is calling you. So you're not writing what you know, you're writing what you are being called to know. And that's why the function and purpose of all the art that we make is to be in that space, in that investigation. And, you're right. I think that we're in a cutthroat business, that it doesn't, always represent that the best get rewarded for anything. But you will be rewarded if something is presented to you in a creative way and you follow that creation. I mean, we don't know where anything is taking us in life. And so there is something there for any writer if they choose to open it up and look at it.
Just picking up on what you said, and you said a lot because you covered a number of topics, but I'm just going to focus in on one, and I'll be a little bit contrary. There's a saying I always tell my students, and the saying is tools, not rules. You tell me the screenwriting rule, I will show you the TV series or the film that completely violates it. And I'm going to do that right now. So the general principle or guideline that's governed film and TV from the beginning of time is find a character or characters with whom we identify. That character or characters are going to have some kind of fear, limitation, or emotional issue or block. They will be forced to overcome it. Because the audience identifies with them, the audience will be taken along on an emotional ride. When that character feels pain, the audience will feel pain. When that character feels triumph, the audience will feel triumph. That's a nice guideline, and it probably governs 95 or 98% of all stories. Except in modern times, to a very mature audience, which the American audience is, suddenly you have The Sopranos. I think that's where it began. No Sopranos, no Breaking Bad. You have Sopranos, Breaking Bad, Fleabag. These TV series are full of disgusting people. And I don't identify with them, and yet people watch them. Why? I'll let the scholars figure that out. I'm just saying that for every rule, there's going to be exceptions. And this is why I just have given up on teaching rules. And I say, here's some guidelines. I'll also say, break the guidelines, shrink the budget. You want to break every guideline? You don't want to have an Act 1 break and an Act 2 break? Fine, shrink the budget. You want to have characters that we can't stand? Great, go for it. Want to write Fleabag? Great. Shrink the budget so that you don't have to make as much money to, break even. So that's the one thing that the main point.
So I understand, meaning that if you break these rules, you are automatically reducing the size of the potential.
You're more likely.
Right.
You might hit a home run with The Sopranos. Brilliant writing, surprising writing. Oh, the other guideline is that don't bore people. I had a teacher once, she said, I'll go to see a dance performance. I'll go to see Cirque du Soleil. I'll go see Chinese acrobats. I'll go to see a magic show. I'll go to see a play. But please don't bore me. Please, every 20 seconds, give me something new, a surprise of one form or another. In TV, it might be an unexpected reaction by a character. It might be a revelation of a new character facet. It might be something that's going on beneath the surface of a character. It might be a plot twist. It might be Tom Cruise coming drunk over to Dorothy's house, to Renee Zellweger's house, and bumping his head on a lamp 3 times, or going to a big ear that she has for some reason on her on a shelf going, hello. I just was watching Jeremy Maguire. It's like, okay, I didn't see that coming. The more you can make the audience go, I didn't see that coming, if the audience is emotionally involved.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're coming up, you're winning.
Okay, I would say that you greatly misunderstood what I said.
Well, I'm very good at that.
Yes, that's okay.
I'm very, very good at misunderstanding. And I look forward to misunderstanding all of you.
If I was going to give a great example of a powerful character arc in a dramatic series, I would use The Sopranos.
Yeah, but the Seinfelds none of the characters have character arcs. They all end up in jail where they belong.
Well, then you don't understand a character arc. A character arc is not a guarantee that a character is going to ascend. A character arc can very easily fail. And then we see that all through our lives. All of us know people who never grew past the age of 35. I mean, a character arc merely presents the challenge in front of the character, whether the character accepts it or not. I mean, if you look at one of the great American tragedies is the trilogy of The Godfather. And at every opportunity, Michael Corleone is offered the opportunity to grow past his limitations. And he succeeds at the end of the plot. He becomes the most powerful, and it is a completely hollow victory. That is a human story. That is a very powerful human story. So a character arc is not a guarantee that a character is going to do anything.
It's also not a guarantee that you're going to like them. You don't have to like them.
Yeah.
It's not important that we sympathize with the character. It's important that we empathize with the character.
But, it also does make the character more relatable. In other words, if I knew a Tony Soprano in real life, I'd probably be terrified of him and, wouldn't want to have anything to do around him. Yet I can watch him because he is playing out an aspect of the human drama. Okay, his operating system is that might makes right, and that he is above the law, and to some degree, he achieves that. But to a greater degree, he is an example of a living hell.
But why do people love him so much then?
Because, I think that, and maybe Chris can help me out here too, I think because all of these characters they're archetypes that live within all of us. So when you have the archetype of a
Walter White.
But let's say, just dealing with Tony Soprano, he's an outlaw.
Yeah.
Okay, and so there is a part of each one of us that wants the outlaw. We want to that when we are mistreated or mischallenged, that someone can go in and right that wrong above the law. So outlaws and all kinds of these are all archetypal aspects of the human of our human drama, and within the realm of Tony Soprano, he is humanized. Okay, there's a lot about Tony Soprano that is absolutely despicable as a human being, and yet we also identify with elements of Tony Soprano that keeps trying, mostly failing, at reaching out, caring about his family, caring about his wife. That's complex.
It's
That's
true.
really interesting.
Every time I whack somebody, I think, man, this is just like,
You know,
this is what Tony would have done.
But wait a minute. Are you saying that all drama should be literalized?
No,
It's symbolic. It's metaphorical.
I'm not saying anything. I'm
Could
just saying.
I just give a different
Actually,
interpretation of this?
Yeah.
Are you going to be my simultaneous translator?
Once again, this is where genre is very helpful.
Yes.
This is a gangster story. The gangster is the most negative main character in all of story, right? They're supposed to be unlikable. It's not that he is going against this identification. You raise a good question. Why do we identify with him anyway? Why do we identify with Michael Corleone? There's a very simple structural reason. They're driving the action. And one of the problems that Coppola and Mario Puzo had when they were at the end of one, and they were thinking about writing two, is they didn't get the response from the audience that they wanted, because you put your finger on it, which is, this is a character who succeeds on the plot plane, but falls on the character arc plane. He's become a king. He's also lost his soul and become the devil. This is very rare in storytelling. It's one of the reasons it's one of the great movies. But the audience leaves the theater and they're thinking, fantastic, he nailed all those sons of bitches in the other 5 families.
Right.
And so when they wrote 2, they purposely got away from this classic identification model of structure, where, because we want Michael to succeed on the plot level, we go along with the fact that he is a real asshole.
I want to add something just quickly, what Chris has continued to say about how making a connection with the audience. Something also really powerful happens in what you were just describing. Once we make that identification with the protagonist, they're our protagonist, okay? And notice what happens to us when he's about to kill his brother Fredo. We're not passive in that. We're sitting here saying, don't kill your brother, right? So we are participating in that. And this is why I feel story is really, I refer to story as the human instruction manual. It's telling us, don't go there, okay? That's the value of characters who are
You're absolutely
so
right,
tragic.
but my point is, it's important to distinguish for the writers who might be in this weekend. It's important to distinguish the techniques that Coppola and Puzo used the first time, and then they realized, we've got to find ways to distance the viewer, the audience, from this main character, so they're not cheering for him to kill his brother.
Right.
Right? And that's brilliant.
Yes.
That's one of the things brilliant.
But how do you still support him after he kills his brother?
Well, you may not support him.
Morally, we don't.
Yeah.
This is very unique.
But we excuse it.
It's very unique. It's very Shakespearean in that way, and it's very advanced technique. Now, one thing I want to pick up on what you're talking about this character. One of the things I'm going to be talking about in this weekend is what I think is the single most important technique in all of story. And it's a very broad one, but it's that plot should come from character. You know, when I was talking before about, what distinguishes the ability to create complex plot, it's not to say, we don't care about character. Quite the opposite. It's that plot, whatever those beats are, has to come from the character arc that you set up front. If you don't have that connection, whether the person succeeds or not in the plot, the audience doesn't care.
You know, I disagree. I agree that for many films, I really find exceptions to every rule, and now I'll give you an exception to that one. The rule might govern 80% of all films, but the whole idea in Hollywood of high concept means I can pitch you a story and I don't touch upon character, and you can decide if you want to hear it. I'll give you a pitch. A teenage boy goes into the past, stops his parents from falling in love. If they don't fall in love, he won't be born. Now, that's Back to the Future, of course. And for those of you who have never seen it, it's definitely worth seeing. Now, I didn't say he was a shy boy. I didn't say he was an outgoing boy. I know in integration, you would try as much as possible to get the authentic voice, and you might say that's a dated film because there's nothing there that's really expressive of the human condition on a very deep level.
Not at all.
Thank you. There, he doesn't even have a character arc. He's what I call a traveling angel. I don't think I invented that. He comes in, he causes his father to have a character arc. The angel comes in, changes, someone else goes out, goes back to, I think, It's a Wonderful Life. In any case, so there, you sell the pitch just based on that. We don't go into character. You're going to talk about Harry Met Sally, which someone brought up. You're going to talk about Fleabag. It's all about the character. And you could put that character in almost any story. Now, you do have places where they come together. Breaking Bad would be an example where you might say they're equally balanced. I'd say Inside Out is equally balanced between the internal and the integrated of the internal and the plot. But it's a broad spectrum out there of the kinds of stories that people watch. And some are high concept, where the characters in their internal life are not as important as just the kick-ass concept. So it's a big, broad world of entertainment.
One of the biggest problems with high concept, and this is where, don't get me into the bugaboo of Pitch Fest, which I despise, but this idea that people think, well, this meets that, this story meets that story, drives me nuts. Because the problem with a high concept pitch, even though you have to have it, quote, have to have it, is that if it's really high concept, it gives you one scene. One scene. And what most writers don't have the technique for is how do you go from one scene that high concept is based on and extend it out in a movie over 2 hours.
That's just a paucity of imagination.
No, it's not. It is not a paucity of imagination. That is a paucity of technique. They have no clue, especially at the premise level, which is the single most difficult step of, in my opinion, in the writing process, because you have the least to go on. And yet it's the single most important decision that you make, because if you screw that up, you're dead for the next 6 months to a year.
Just to put a bookend on the point, Back to the Future is as high concept as it gets. And we really don't know that much about Marty, the lead character, by the end, except that he's pretty clever in handling situations. It's not like we've done a deep dive into a complex character. And the movie is considered perfect by a lot of people, including me. I wouldn't change anything in it. I learned that if you go 88 miles an hour and you have a flux capacitor, then you exit the time-space continuum and you can do a lot of cool things. And that was enough of a takeaway for me. I smiled a lot, I laughed a lot. And then there are going to be other films that I mentioned, Poor Things, which kind of touches something in me, I don't know why. But it's all character-driven. So it's just entertainment's a big, broad thing. I understand what you're doing is critically important, and I have found the same thing. There were two types of writers. And when I had to hire writers, I had two writing tests. One was the character dialogue test, and one was the imagination brainstorming test, because I so rarely found the two of them in the same writer, excuse me. And so I came to the same conclusion you did on my own. It seems to be there are those two types of people.
Could I bring up a subject that I think is very relevant to everybody, and I think is going to be incredibly relevant this weekend? We are fortunate to have been living through two story revolutions. And this is in all of human history. One is the move of television to become an art form. Because in the last 20 years, as I'm sure everybody here knows, television has taken over, as especially American television, but we're seeing this all over the world, as the number one medium for quality storytelling in the world. Television far surpasses film, and that's one reason why we're getting so few films, because it cannot compete with television on that level. The other revolution, which may be even bigger, is the reemergence of the female myth. Now, the female myth, and I know this is something Dara's interested in, I know that Chris is interested in. Female myth has been gone from Western culture for 3,000 years, when it was wiped out by male warrior myth.
Do you want to just briefly explain what the female myth is?
Well, it's a big subject, and one of the things I'm going to be talking about in this weekend is this reemergence of the female myth, how it is distinguished from the male myth. But it is only, things like Inside Out is a perfect example of female myth and how it handles the myth story form, which is essentially a journey story form, how it handles the journey very different than a male myth does. And by the way, one of the interesting things about it is that just because you have a female lead character doesn't mean it's a female myth. Wonder Woman is a male myth story. It's a male myth structure. Inside Out is a female myth structure. Now, there's a lot of different female myths, but there are certain similarities that we see in all of them. And the way I usually explain it for audiences in terms of theme, if you could simplify it down to one line, is male myth is all about divide and conquer. Female myth is about combine and grow. And those are very different things.
What is Toy Story 3?
I'm going to have to think about it for
Or
a little
Toy Story? I mean, it's about a group of people. I mean, in almost every Pixar film, in the end of the story, not all of them, but in many of them, Ratatouille, Bug's Life, Incredibles, it's a group of people. Yeah. The hero goes off by himself or herself and then finds they need a group. The group could be a family, it could be your tribe to save, it could be all your rat relatives to save the day. I don't see those as divide and conquer stories. I don't know. Again, you give me a rule, I'll find the exception.
And again, I have to go through my encyclopedia. I do remember that I thought Toy Story 3 was the best of the 3 Toy Stories, and I think they're all great scripts. I think it's a fabulous series of stories. But
I mean, Coco is about a boy who has to heal his family in 2 realms: the current living family and his ancestors, because he goes into the land of the dead. It's wonderful, but no one's dividing and no one's conquering. It's kind of the opposite.
Again, just because you have a female in a story doesn't make it a female myth. Just because you have a male in a story doesn't make it a male myth.
That is true.
It is the structural beats of the story that determine it and the overall theme, which leads me to think that Toy Story 3 may very well be a female myth. There are certain things that are obvious. My point in bringing it up is that this emergence of female myth is huge. And I believe it's going to be one of the major story forms for the next decades to come. And it's something I want to talk about. I suspect that you two will be talking about it as well. And everywhere I go around the world when I teach class, the one thing that people are more interested in, writers are more interested than any other subject, is female myth.
Yeah, I think you're right that it is some kind of pivot that's happening, as big as what happened in '77 when Star Wars came out, and just like a switch was turned from anti-heroes and little kitchen sink dramas and serious streets and all of that into, oh no, we can revive this whole thing. So I think you're right that it's nearly even more.
I think your comments are extremely well taken, obviously by me, because that's my area of expertise, but. And I think it tells us a lot about where the culture resides as well. Yeah. Because I define it slightly differently, but we're both saying the same thing, that so much of our storytelling has been oriented toward the masculine, and I define the masculine archetypally as our experiences in the outer physical world. Mm-hmm. And those experiences are essential in life. They're not like either or. We need, the whole warrior archetype is something that is essential to every human being, that we need to protect our boundaries. We need to create worlds that we can live in. We need to, form of identification, and on and on and on. These are all external challenges that we all face, so we create an external reality. And the feminine mythologies, when you open them up, that whereas the masculine is an outer-bound journey, the feminine is an inbound journey, okay? So whereas he's going out, she's going down and in. And so it's not either or. We get back to the idea of character arc. This is what a character arc is showing us, that we face challenges in the outer world that are impacting our inner life.
So Birdman is a female myth?
Well, okay, you keep it. It's not that we relegate it to a myth, okay? That one of the things that you'd never want to do is write to a myth. In other words, this is something. Mythic stories are told and retold because they are sort of the container that has moved the human narrative through time. And one of the things that we say is that the more you tell a story, the more you're telling our story. So that a myth that has survived is a container of something very valuable. So that you write a story, and then somewhere in that story you may find that you are telling a particular mythic tale or just aspects of the tale.
I
so
feel
it's
like
not
I have to channel Chris
it's not a thing.
Okay, channel me, baby.
So I'm going to try to channel you, because you probably have done a deeper dive into mythic structures more than anyone at this table, and you're noted for that. I think you would say, and if not, I'll say it for you, that if you're using this structure or that structure, you're using your structure or some mythic structure, or you're using some system, or you're talking about male-female myths and divide and conquer, or let's come together and hug, or whatever, or work it out together, or let's go internal, or let's go externally. And I'll say this to the camera, I'll say it to the people watching this. You're going to find a lot of great thought on many different systems. And some will pull you and you'll gravitate toward them, and some will make no sense to you. If you find principles or systems that aid you in your storytelling, just make sure that by the time you're done with your story, no one knows that you were using a system. That is, unless you make it so original and creative, and you break the rules, and you don't have cliche scenes, and you don't have cliche characters. And my definition of boredom is the audience thinks they know what's going to happen, and then it happens. As long as you never bore people and you keep the level of imagination front and center, that's the critical thing. So if you find a system or two that work for you, just make sure that you bury it enough with your imagination, your creativity, and the authenticity or the pretend authenticity, whatever it is that draws the audience in, that we never see the formulas poking through. That's it.
I said that very well. Thank you.
Thank you. You would agree?
Yes, I would. And I just would, as I put it, it's that you probably want to know where the bones are, but you don't want the audience to see the bones.
I mean, in the Matrix,
yeah,
you have your Gandalf character. She's called the Oracle. But the reason we don't go, oh, she's the same as Gandalf in Lord of the Rings, is because she bakes cookies. Mm-hmm. And because she has a very dry sense of humor, and she does other things that interrupt there's a thin line between an archetype and a stereotype. There are things that differentiate her from the archetype/stereotype enough that the audience never for a moment thinks, oh, she's an archetypal character. She might be, but at least our attention is not drawn to those aspects of her function in the story.
I'd say too that you collect these things, these principles, these rules of thumb, these guidelines, and you sort of match them to your own personality and figure out, I can do that. That makes sense to me. That's something I can use. So you go through a period as a writer, gathering all those things and practicing with them. But then there's one kind of overriding principle for me, which is know all those principles and make sure you break them someplace.
Thank you.
Yeah, in every piece of work. And I could take that down to every scene and every line of dialogue. There should be some shiver of unexpected surprise in it, with playing all within all of these guidelines and rules, but make sure that you break the rules. Somehow.
You channel me very well.
Ah, very good.
And Corey, I think you had something to.
Well, so my bias is working with writers and helping writers be able to do this. So that's where my bias is coming from. And I think that John says something really smart, which is we don't need to sympathize, we need to empathize with the character. I think that's a very smart way of putting it. But then the question is, how do you do that as a writer? And Chris, I thought, said something really smart about, identifying, relating to the character on screen. But again, how do you do that? And in working with writers, the way I would think about characters is, and I might disagree with some of you who were talking about Tony Soprano and Fleabag as like these despicable characters. Here's how I would look at it. So let's take Walter White. Okay, so he is in a really terrible jam, and he is just freaked out, and he needs money, and he does something really terrible in order to make money. I can totally relate to that. I have been in situations in my life where I was so scared about my security or my family's security that I have sometimes done stuff that I'm not proud of. I can relate to that. But I've never cooked crystal meth. I've never killed people.
Yeah.
And I think, well, yes, okay, but shh. But I think that's the key. I think the key is we identify with Walter White, and he is us, but he's not us. Because if he is us, if I'm watching Fleabag and I'm like, that's me, that's very uncomfortable. Now, if I'm watching Fleabag and I'm like, I don't relate at all to her, that's boring. So Fleabag, when she's in emotional pain, she disengages and she disassociates and she has self-sabotaging behavior. Can I relate to that? Absolutely. Has my behavior killed my best friend? No. So I watch that and I'm like, I'm her and I'm not her. It's that paradox. I'm her and I'm not her. So what I find is helpful with writers, and this is for those of you that struggle with story structure, this is something that you might want to play with, because I've worked with a lot of writers who follow the paradigms and the rules and try to impose the plot, and they don't have any success. And what you can do is, so you take your character and you start with yourself in terms of like what your great pain is, what you're struggling with in life, and you heighten it. You heighten it to the place that is way beyond anything you would do. But it's coming from like a real pain, like whatever you're struggling with, whatever your insecurity or whatever it is in life that you're struggling with. You start there, but then you heighten it to a place that you would never go to. And that is how you can find your story, and that's how a lot of showrunners work, is they'll start from what it is that they are personally struggling with. And then they will heighten it to a place that, again, is way beyond what they would do. And that gives you the main sort of tentpole plot, and then you can just write from there. And that's a great way of doing integration. So that's a great way of ending up with something where, I mean, Shakespeare started this when he was writing his plays, like, Hamlet. Because think about Shakespeare for a second. There had never been plays before. There was no such thing as a proscenium art. So he has all these people standing there who'd never seen a play, and it's in broad daylight. And now the actors are going to come on stage. And if the people standing there are not interested, they're going to get on stage and probably kill these people. It was very rough crowd, and he has to get their attention. And Shakespeare uses the same technique in all of his plays, which is, think about Hamlet. So everyone who is standing there can relate to a screwed up family and, parents who aren't necessarily faithful. But an uncle who murders the father to sleep with the mother, now that is friggin' crazy.
Wait a minute, I thought that was the relatable part.
So the point is, if you look at all of his characters, everyone who's watching it, they can relate to the character, but yet that character is not them, because that character is such a heightened representation of them. So it's a really cool way to create story structure where you start with yourself, it leads you to character, which leads you to story.
Is there a voyeuristic nature to TV and film? Like if you see an accident, you go, I want to watch the accident.
Yeah.
Is it the same thing with Walter White? You're like, oh shit, I'm so glad I'm not that guy, but I can't wait to see what he does next.
But here's the thing, you are that guy and you're not that guy. That's what makes that show, that's what makes Fleabag successful.
And that's why we tune in.
Yeah,
because we want to see
if it's not us and it's a train wreck, I could see that in the world. I could just tune on CNN and see a train wreck. The whole world's a train wreck. I don't care about that.
I'm going to translate this into Freemanese.
Oh boy.
Which is I'm going to talk about getting there through external means, which is, of course, not what I love what you're doing. This is just another approach. I mentioned that I know 89 ways to make an audience identify with the character. One of them would be, let's say, the character is forced by circumstances to violate their own integrity for the greater good, but they suffer. And I could give you example after example from movies, and I'm not going to do that. Maybe on stage, I'll do that, at our expo. But you give the character a number of these empathy techniques. Walter White's perfect. He is has so much undeserved misfortune, which is technique number one. Put the hero in danger is number two. These are the most obvious ones. He has so much unfairness, injustice, undeserved misfortune, and for his kid too. And let alone then you just pile on. He's going to die. That's not very fair, is it? And all of these things cause us to identify with him. So these are all empathy techniques working on a subconscious level. And then you just flips anything upside down. Oh, and he also makes crystal meth and kills people and blah, 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 blah. You have some empathy techniques, some upside down empathy techniques that makes some things that make him identifiable, some not. We have a flawed hero. And all these techniques are working on a subconscious level. Now, it doesn't do the deep internal plumbing, roto-rootering that your process does and that your process does. But if you have to create lots of movies and lots of TV shows and lots of characters, it's a workable way to guarantee that the audience will identify with the characters to the extent that you want them to. It's just a different approach. It doesn't involve the deep psychological work, but it's repeatable. We talked about, we all have our favorite one-hit wonders in Hollywood. Oh my God, I wish that writer had done it again. They did it here in this series and they never did it again. And it grieves us because we wanted to see more of their magic.
But the challenge with that is it tends to create generic scripts, generic characters, and the industry's moving away from that. It's not interesting.
When I was teaching writing for Disney and Fox, the hardest part was getting people just to have imagination. I had to create so many exercises. Like, I have them write, I got this from Richard Curtis, who wrote Four Weddings and a Funeral. I'd have them write the same scene like 4 or 6 times and complete, and then that was a waste of time. So then I would just have them brainstorm the same scene 4 or 6 times, and I wouldn't even allow them to write until I heard all 6 versions.
But the thing is, you don't need imagination. If someone has been in love and suffered loss, and someone that they love is no longer in their lives, and they've strived, everything they need is inside them if they know how to access it and use it. What's important is to write a script that whenever I bring agents into my UCLA class, this is what they always say. You have to write a script that no one else could have written. So that doesn't mean starting with lists or rules necessarily. It means starting inside you and what is unique about you, because you have to write a script to stand out, to get anyone to want to invest in you or give you a chance. You're going to have to write something that no one else could have written.
Well, I feel I've treated you unfairly because I've disagreed with everyone else, and I feel this time I have to disagree with you.
I've been waiting for it. Bring it on.
Okay, so for those of you who saw Jerry Maguire, maybe everybody's favorite scene is Jerry and Dorothy have spent the night together. That's Renee Zellweger and Tom Cruise. Bonnie Hunt, who hates men, gave depth to her character in the scene before where she's hearing Dorothy and Jerry having a good time frolicking, and she's crying because she doesn't, as much as she hates men, she kind of wishes she was Dorothy at that moment, just giving a little bit of another side to her personality. In any case, Jerry in the morning, a very loud alarm clock wakes him up. He steps into the hall just in time to hear Dorothy say to her sister, well, here's a little secret for you. I love him. I love him. I do. I love him for the man he almost is, and I love him for the man he wants to be. Something like this. And of course, this is her worst nightmare, to know, and then she hears her son Ray go, "Hi, Jerry," and she knows that Jerry just overheard that. And then it's high anxiety as he walks into the kitchen, and she's wondering how he's going to react to hearing her outburst. I love him for the man he almost is. And of course, he's very casual and cool with it, but it takes her for a while to believe it. There is so much, I mean, I don't know what your internal experience is with love or dating or blah, 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 blah. But I look at a scene like this and I just go, imagination, imagination, imagination. And I go.
But isn't that just another word for creativity?
Well,
She's doing a romantic comedy different than other people have been doing
I'm just saying that
that's easy to say and very difficult to do.
No, I'm not. I'm agreeing with you. I'm just saying no amount of interiority, no amount of internal experience with love or dating that I've ever had would have made me come up with something that creative. I'm just saying imagination. Every 20 seconds.
How do you think Cameron works? I mean, how do you think these writers? I think what you're doing very smartly
is agreeing with you.
No, is you keep like explaining the product, but what I'm trying to get is how do people create it, and that's how these writers create it. It comes from them. It comes from inside them, and they create something that only they could have created.
But where I've got to, I don't know if disagree is the right word, but where I would extend it a little bit, yeah, you need to go from that personal place. Yeah. But my point is that if you do not know that you are writing a romantic comedy and what those beats are, like if you don't have a first kiss in a romantic comedy, you do not have a romantic comedy. And your audience will hate you.
Oh,
let me finish the point. The point is, these beats are there. These beats are there, and that's what makes all together, the sequence of them makes that form. And so my point is, I was talking about the 3 rules, and normally I hate to use the word rules because one of the biggest cliches I've ever heard that drives me nuts is that you see on these Facebook boards, and they say, oh, you got to learn the rules to break the rules. As though breaking the rules, if that's all you do, you're going to have a well-written script. That's nonsense. It's total nonsense. My point is that you do have to write something that is totally unique. The agents are absolutely right about that. The question is, how do you do it?
Right.
And you start from a place that is internal and creative, but I'm saying that has got to work through the process of knowing what these beats are in your forms and then transcending the form. To go back to Walter White, this is one of the most revolutionary TV shows in history. One reason for it is that the premise, which he pitched as, I want to take this guy from Mr. Chips to Scarface. I want to go from Dr. Jekyll to Mr. Hyde. He had a complete character arc over the entire show. Most shows had never been done that way because they were designed to go forever. Well, you look at Walter White, this is a guy, and this goes off in a lot of what you're saying, which is we identify with him because it took the main character in a crime story, to transcend a crime story, took the main character, who is normally a criminal, made him an everyman. And then slowly but surely they twisted the moral straitjacket and put him under greater and greater pressure. And one of the writers on the show said, and this is a perfect example of technique that writers on television and writer staffs know because they are the best at story technique of any writers I have ever encountered. He said, there was a point where we had to take Walter from doing things for the right reasons, he's trying to help his family because he's dying of cancer, to he goes too far. And once he falls off the moral cliff, which happens when he lets the woman aspirate, and he doesn't save her, that's when Walter White moves into Mr. Hyde.
I want to respond. So I want to start by saying I have nothing but genuine respect for you, for your intelligence, and for the work that you've done. We start in the same place, but we are opposite in where we very much disagree on where you go from there. And what I would say is, I think there's a right way and a wrong way. And I think the right way is whatever allows the writer to get to where they're going. And I think that there's different paths. And I think that for some people, the path that you outline is going to allow them to get to the promised land. I'm just going to articulate a different path, not a better path, just a different path. So what I would say is once you start from that internal place, don't think about genre. Again, just a different path. Don't think about the beats. Don't let the beats tell you what to do. Let the characters tell you what to do. Let the characters lead you to the story. And I think that a big reason why nobody watches romantic comedies anymore is that everyone started following the same beats, and it's the same story.
It's
and
always
we're
been
bored.
the case with romantic comedy. Always.
No, but Fleabag, second season, is beautiful. It doesn't follow, and it is all character-led, and it is unique. And you look at The Bear. I mean, that is where romantic comedies have gone. They've moved away. So all I'm saying is, and I think this is the great thing about the weekend, and I think it's really smart about what you're doing, is everyone here is on the same team. We all want stronger stories. We want to help empower writers to become the best storytellers they can be and have the best possible chance of the best possible career. We all want that. And we all, I think, are going to be teaching different paths. And I think that's great because, you know, a writer may come and what Chris is talking about and his path might really be the thing that unlocks it to where they're going to go. And the same is for everyone. But I'll just say, and I think this is the cool thing about the weekend, is that we're going to just completely contradict each other. And I'm going to tell writers, don't do it that way, do it this way. And you're going to tell writers, no. And I think the great thing is you get to come, and we're not just making this stuff up. We've been doing this for a long time. We've worked with a lot of very successful writers. Our opinions are very informed. And I think that's the great thing about this weekend, is that everyone can come and they can get all these different perspectives. There's a great Hindu saying that we all want to get to, let's say, God or divinity or to, you know, our better selves. And they say there's a mountain, and that's on top of the mountain, and we're in the valley. And we want to get there. We want to get to our better selves, our better angels, to divinity, whatever it is we're going. And there's different paths up the mountain, but there are false paths. False paths don't get you to the top of the mountain, but there are more than one real path that take you to the top of the mountain. And they're different. Some paths are very steep, and you get there quick, but it's very strenuous. Some are slower and more gentler. And different people are born to different paths, but no path is better than a different path. That's why the Hindus have never, well, we don't need to get into that. But I think that's true of storytelling. And I think that there's different paths to get there. And I think it's really awesome that you're going to have a week, or you've assembled a weekend where people are going to be talking about different paths. And then the people who attend are going to have...
I have to interject one thing that has nothing to do with paths, stories, and approaches. This is not related to anything that anyone has actually said here, which is quite often an actor, director, an agent won't read past the writer's first 3 pages. And if they read the first three pages, maybe they'll go on to the first 5 or 6 pages. And if they like those, maybe they'll go on to page 10 or 12. And it's going to be a while before they decide, I want to read this entire script. So long before your beats kick in, long before the internal voice of whatever passion is driving the lead character kicks in, there's just a level of craftsmanship and imagination and surprise that has to be there, because you have to hook the agent, the director, the producer so many times in those first 3, first 5, first 10 pages, to show how clever, maybe might be the word, just how out of the box you are, how surprising you are, and still have some emotional moments that let people know that you're firmly operating with all cylinders firing emotionally, creatively, etc.
But as Corey said, I mean, you said better, you wrapped it up better than I could. I mean, that's the great thing about this weekend, is to have so much experience from so many different points of view. You don't have to agree with one person. You don't have to agree with anybody.
Right.
But if it sparks something in you,
Right.
then that's the whole point
Right.
of it. And that's why I think that this event draws such professional writers from around the world, because they know the value of the education that they're going to take away from this weekend.
And I think everybody sort of has the responsibility. The people attending have the responsibility to listen, take what makes sense to you, what works for you, and then create your own system.
Yeah.
You know, don't follow. The last thing you want to do is follow with any kind of precision or,
Amen. Amen.
Total commitment. I'm going to go down this road and I'm going to check all these
You got to find your path.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Amen.
Yeah. Yeah. And you'll take, cherry pick from all the others that make sense to you. Yeah. And thank God you have so many options that are all reflections of a reality. But ultimately, you're the maker.
And I think people will be surprised at how complementary they are. In other words, I think if you look at each of these approaches very carefully, you'll see that there are not many places where they're contradictory. I don't think what we are saying is contradictory at all. We're just talking about a different point of the process that we work through. But I think that the trick is to take what you find works for you, but also listen to everybody and see if there's a synthesis that you can create in your own storytelling process that gives you the best story you can write. That's what this weekend's going to be all about.
Yeah, I'm so happy when somebody listens to me and I have my language and I have my points and I have my order I present them in, and they dive into it and start changing it all around, and I'm not offended by that or worried about that. It's like, good, now you got it.
And with that, thank you, Chris Vogler, Dara Marks, Corey Mandell, David Freeman, John Truby. We will see you guys in September for Story Expo's Masters of Story, and thank you guys again. This is great.
Thank you for watching Story Expo's Masters of Story Roundtable discussions.